Hello and welcome to the Delivery Manager Daily. This is episode 8 and a bit. Still waiting for episode 9. I wanted to do a couple of very short, in a way that your mum would understand, descriptions of things that I hear delivery managers throughout my career kind of explain to clients and colleagues, and they get it a bit wrong. And one is, in particular, Devops, what that is. So welcome to the Delivery Manager Daily. We're going to walk through what Devops is in a way that, if you're not technical, hopefully I can make it come to life for you. And also you can explain to a client or a colleague. And ideally watch this on YouTube, because there is a nice whiteboard that I've done that kind of conveys the notion of what DevOps is. So jumping straight into it, to understand what DevOps is and why it came about, we have to first look back at history and how projects used to be run. And in a classic waterfall style, you'd have the notion of an idea being formed, governance being built around it, a plan being fully formed and set in stone, and then something would be built to a certain specification. It was only then tested to find out that it was wrong, and then it would be passed back up the line to be fixed, and then it would be tested again and it would still be wrong, and you'd go through iterations of these through waterfall gates until you got to a point where it was ready for the market, at which point the market needs had changed, and lo and behold, you had a project that was massively over budget, massively over time. And you only need to look back through history at projects like the space shuttle project in particular, or more recently over the last 20 years or so, big public sector projects that have gone wrong. This kind of notion of testing after it's been built is one of the very reasons Agile's been such a thing for the past 20, 30 years or so, right? If not longer, to try and get out of that waterfall mentality. Well, as people have refined kind of how they work and organizations have changed and started or tried to, over the last 30, 40 years, implement enterprise agility, one of the things that's come to the foreground is DevOps. What is DevOps? It's two things. It's both a cultural enablement for developers to be able to work in an environment, to submit code, to check code out in a safe space, to be able to write code in isolation, test it before submitting back to, in effect, a master branch or a repository, to be able to have this ongoing continual improvement and continual release cycle. If that doesn't make sense, think about how you use your iPhone. Every few weeks, you'll get an iOS update. You get a little notification to say iOS 14 point something has been released, and it's going to fix these problems and bring you these new features. And then it asks you to put your phone on charge. When do you want to install it? And then Apple do this very clever thing where they download the package, sanity check it to make sure it's not going to brick your phone, make sure your phone's connected to power, and then it deploys that update to your operating system on your phone, and you get bug fixes and these enhanced features. And that's been happening ever since we've had iPhones, right? That is a CI/CD pipeline, a really good quality one. So continual improvement, continual delivery, and that's what you aspire to do, in particular when you're delivering software. But also DevOps is a cultural thing to an organization as well, which, as well as from a technical perspective, which we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about, in quotes, a DevOps pipeline, what we're also talking about is an organizational notion of bringing a development or build team and an operational team together. So typically in those waterfall projects that we spoke about, it would always be a case of, once the build team had built the thing and handed it over to operations, it's their problem now. We've built it, it worked in our test environments, you have it. And that hasn't worked for a long time and caused so many problems and challenges. And if you look at organizations that are managing really wieldy legacy platforms and pieces of software that's been built outside of sort of group testing, and they're having to manage all the faults and things because it's an, in quotes, operational problem now. So what do we mean by operations in a business? These are the people that are using the thing, often back office staff, or if you've ever worked at a call center and you've used call center software that's been built by the same organization. Obviously, it was built in a perfect environment. It's rolled out to your 300 call agents, and it's ropey, full of bugs, etc., because none of the people that use it day to day were involved in the testing or the build or the design. So DevOps is bringing those groups of people in an organization together. So it's this notion of not lobbing code over the wall and then leaving it for another part of the business to deal with. And if you're looking on YouTube, you'll see that the I guess the graphic of that is a wall and the two departments chucking stuff over to one another, whether it's a ticket to fix something or the code in the first place. And that's a problem that's endemic in organizations even now. Also, from a C-level executive perspective, obviously these ideas come to fruition and organizations want to change, or they want to build something or do something, and everyone gets excited and we start building straight away without actually thinking about the cost of ownership, the cost of running the thing that you're building, whether that's a service or a product. The people that are consuming the service or product or supporting it, they need stability. The operational part of the business need that stability, and often they're not thought about. So again, you have this kind of tennis match of just lobbing features over without thinking of the people that are supporting and running the thing that's being built. So DevOps was born, and it's born through this notion of this continual loop of communication, development, strategy and techniques, a foundation of technology and tools, and also cultural enablement to make sure that both the build and the development side of the business, along with the operation and the testing side, are joined together. And it's this integration, and you'll often see DevOps diagrammed as like some form of infinity loop. There are some core principles of DevOps: flow, making sure that there's a constant feedback loop between these sides of the business, that feedback, and there's a mechanism to provide that feedback, and then the CI/CD bit, which is continual integration, continual delivery, which involves tooling and involves technology as well, to make sure that it's possible to release code continuously to a product that's gone live, to be able to further enhance, refine, support, upgrade, and scale. So if we look at what developers do, again, from a developer perspective, they're going to have some form of plan, or they're going to do the plan themselves. They're going to write the code, they're going to build that code, and they're going to test the code. But there needs to be a way to get people in operations to look at what that product's going to look like before it's deployed, to be able to inform and advise and offer feedback, and make sure that the testing is done as they go, so there's no big bugs to fix as your first version is released. So that's where Agile comes in. So you start using practical elements of Agile like Kanban and your show and tells and going through Scrum to be able to facilitate that feedback loop. And there are all the things that feed back into that DevOps pipeline. Lean, taken from manufacturing, a lot of those lean principles work in this example as well. So that notion of, I think there's 7 or 8 lean principles, like satisfy the customer, welcoming change, being able to deliver frequently, working together, trust and support, maintaining simplicity and reflecting and adjusting on the fly. DevOps supports, the notion of Agile supports. And from a manufacturing perspective, you've kind of taken those and embraced them as a way of working. It's really important that we understand and recognize that DevOps is an integral part of Agile. So if we look at the technical elements, what do developers need, and what does a development team need to be able to regularly release code? Well, you're going to need some form of version control and some form of code release control software, like whether it's Jenkins or Git, which you've probably heard of, and they're pretty popular. And this is this notion of being able to submit code to a master branch, and those branches can be controlled and monitored and deployed, making sure that everything that's submitted to them has been tested first. Then that is automated using orchestration tools. And if you've seen one of my talks on management consultancy, I think Zebia Labs have done like the periodic table of DevOps tools. So I won't go through the hundreds, if not thousands, of tools available. But being able to automate the process of checking code out, writing the code, submitting it, and going through various sets of tests to make sure that it's fit for purpose before it's submitted to that notion of a master branch. That automation is absolutely integral to that DevOps foundational pipeline. Making sure that the developers have access to those tools in a way that makes sense, that's seamless and frictionless, even down to things like, as a delivery manager, making sure your dev teams have got the right laptops with the right environment set up, they've got access to all their kind of dependent software, and they're comfortable, and they can check code in, they can see the Git repository or whatever repo software that you're using, and be able to use tools like in a .NET environment like Azure DevOps to be able to report on the health of those branches, how many times code has been checked in and out, where code has been unsuccessful, where bugs have been found or unit tests have failed. And you want to automate as much of that as possible as part of that DevOps foundation and that DevOps pipeline, to make sure that if you are a delivery manager running a software project, you want to make sure that you're in a position as early as possible to get that sorted, so you can start writing code, submitting it and testing it in an automated way. Because later down the project lifecycle, when you've built more of a thing, the importance of DevOps becomes super important. And if you've half jobbed it at the start, then you're just kind of building on this house of cards, and then it'll all come down. Nothing worse than deploying a service live to customers or users and then realizing that you've got no easy way to deploy bug fixes. And obviously this problem manifests exponentially based on your user base. So it's really important, again, when we talk about, well, what are the most difficult things to set up first in a project, get that DevOps pipeline sorted. So broadly speaking, that's kind of DevOps. And obviously, if you're technical and you're super into DevOps, or you're a DevOps engineer, I'm bastardizing the topic and the subject for merely people that don't talk about it every day. So in summary, what is DevOps? It's two things. It's both a technical enablement for delivery teams to be able to submit, test, and release code into the wild to a live product, to be able to scale it and refine it using version control tools, automation tools, and testing tools, and making all that available and visible to project teams. But it's also a cultural thing, bringing operations and other parts of the business that would use that product or are involved in supporting that product, and bringing them in together using agile ways of working, such as Kanban and Scrum, to be able to make sure that there's continuous kind of infinity loop based on three principles of flow, feedback, and continual integration and continual delivery, or sometimes people say continual deployment as well. So in about 10 minutes, I think I've covered that. And obviously you'll really appreciate if you can see it, the whiteboard that I've drew, which will make this come to life a bit. So I will include that in the notes. Make sure you download it. And if you're a delivery manager and you're not that technical and you're trying to get to grips with what DevOps is, then obviously you've got a little bit of an explanation there that is hopefully in plain English. Hopefully that was useful. It's episode 8 and a bit. I'm your host, Mario Di Cristofano from the Delivery Manager Daily. Have a fantastic day. And if you want to get involved in the conversation, you can go to Twitter, daily_DM, I think is the handle, or Mario DC. You can find me on Twitter pretty easily. And we have an Instagram, which I'm just about to set up too. So we're getting into this podcasting game hard. So hopefully you're enjoying these episodes. But thanks for listening. Have a great day, and talk to you very soon.